It's 7 o'clock. I will call the Tuesday, January 9th meeting of the Common Council to order. Ms. Wiles, will you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lees, will you call the roll?
Mr. Boyce?
Present.
Mr. Davis?
Present.
Mr. Elliott?
Present.
Mr. Johnson?
Present.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. Schwartz?
Present.
Mr. Thurston?
Present.
Ms. Wiles?
Present.
Mr. Smith?
Present.
Mr. President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes from our December 19th meeting.
Mr. President, I move to approve the minutes from the meeting.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the minutes from our December 19th meeting. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. I know. Approval of the agenda.
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles?
I would move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the agenda as submitted. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. I know. Petitions or comments by citizens who are present. I do not have any, but if somebody would like to speak, we have slips of paper right out there, and you can hand those over to Ms. Lees, and we'll call you up when your item is up for discussion. Council committee reports. Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. We met January 4th. Aaron Smith, Megan Wiles, and myself. Ian and Jeff Spalding talked about a resolution for the authorization for certain routine fiscal actions for 2024. We also talked about a resolution authorization to appropriate grant proceeds for 2024. And Caitlin Moss discussed another ordinance amending City Code 38.01, an authorization for prepayment of certain expenses. Caitlin Moss also gave us an update on the summary of the carry forward encumbrances that we have now, and she talked about the closeout of dormant funds. That and the claims come to the council with a favorable recommendation.
Any questions for Mr. Davis?
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles?
I would move that we approve the claims as presented.
Second?
There's a motion and a second to approve the claims as submitted. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 9-0. Miscellaneous number 1, council to elect 2024 officers. I would like to ask if there are any nominations for the positions.
Mr. President,
Mr. Davis?
I would like to offer up Darren Peterson for president and Megan Wiles for vice president.
Second.
We will go ahead and close the nominations. This is a hand vote to elect Mr. Peterson as president and Ms. Wiles as vice president. Just raise your right hand. The last thing I'm doing is, 9-0.
Best job in the world. Past president. Thank you.
There you are.
Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate the gavel too. What happened to the big gavel?
It's right here. If you make it to the end of the meeting, you get it.
Right, let me get to the end.
We'll see how you do.
Yeah.
Council to receive committee assignments. Those are distributed and should have been sitting at your spot at the dais. Those will be posted online and on Teams at some point if there's anybody from the community who'd like to know who's on what. Miscellaneous number 3, council to approve 2024 meeting guidelines. Evelyn Lees.
Good evening. Before you are the meeting guidelines. There are no changes from the meeting guidelines for last year, but this is something we do each year. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions?
Mr. President, I would move that we approve the 2024 meeting guidelines as presented.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. There's a hand vote. All those in favor of adopting those guidelines, raise your right hand. 9-0. Thank you. New ordinances for discussion. Council to consider ordinance 53-1223, an ordinance adopting an amended development plan and special consideration for a school use, amending ordinance 080222, including an updated preliminary development plan for 17.9 acres of the overall 31 acres of the 14,800 block of Bowden Road West Side.
Move to introduce.
Amy-
Second.
Amy Steffens and Gordon Byers.
Thank you. The subject site under consideration is 17.9 acres of a vacant 31-acre parcel zoned in the corporate campus at the northwest intersection of Greenfield Avenue and Bowden Road. The controlling PD currently only allows for residential uses. Proposed for the 17.9 acres is a school for grades pre-kindergarten through high school. In the corporate campus district, an array of educational uses are considered special consideration uses. At the November 30th, 2023 Plan Commission meeting, the Commission did recommend favorable approval of the special consideration uses by a vote of 10-1. If approved, the project would be subject to review by the Technical Advisory Committee process, and a secondary plat would be required. I'm happy to answer any particular questions that the council may have. All right, thank you.
Any questions? Just to refresh, we have seen this twice in the last 4 years. So
Project on that site.
the project on that site, residential.
Not this project.
Not this project, sorry. Jeez. Okay, Mr. Byers.
Good evening. My name is Gordon Byers. I'm an attorney here in Noblesville, 298 South 10th Street, just down the street. Mr. President, members, new members, congratulations, new members. This is a project that I'll go through quickly and respond to your questions. That's probably more productive, but I want to introduce, I represent the petitioner here is the Aluda Foundation, Inc. It's an Indiana nonprofit entity. And this evening I have Dr. Rashid, who's the superintendent of the school for that would operate here. Dr. Rashid, raise your hand. Okay. And we have also, if you have any technical questions, Bob Ross, he's a PE, and Anna Burrell, who's the architect. They're with Smith Associates. They're seated right here. Smith Associates. You're probably familiar, they work with schools. They primarily have a specialty, I guess, with respect to schools. And I don't want to blind anybody, but this is the famous Deer Creek, Klipsch, Ruoff. The location right here, and the subject site is right here, 31.5 acres. We are simply this evening amending the existing ordinance. The brief history of the existing ordinance is unanimous approval, Plan Commission, Legislative Council, February 2022. So just short of 2 years ago, you, as Mr. Peterson represented, you had this project in front of you, mixed residential, corporate campus, PUD, mixed residential. And we are simply amending, picture's worth 1,000 words, we're amending and changing the blue portion of the subject site. And for all purposes, we're allowing to go on that site a primary and secondary school. Now, the irony is, in Noblesville, traditionally residential is where we put schools. You know, some jurisdictions, they go in residential zones and they become conditional uses. Here it's special, you know, we use a different word, special consideration, which was reviewed, I think, as to the appropriateness of this with respect to the Plan Commission. But that's the subject site, and the only thing we're doing this evening is amending that blue portion of the ordinance. And we're asking for you to approve the amendment to the ordinance to allow primary and secondary school to go on the blue portion. The rest of the ordinance roughly stays the same. It'll remain residential. And if it's developed residential, I can assure you it'll probably have to come back before you because it will be probably an amended preliminary development plan because we're altering the site, so we're altering the preliminary development plan. So the high probability that Joyce Ann will and our staff will exercise jurisdiction and probably bring it back to you. So that site will remain residential, and it'll probably revisit you. Here's, with respect to the school, let me just give you some sort of a general picture of it. It's roughly going to be, it's roughly 120,000 square feet, 2 floors. Second floor is 25 feet. It'll have a couple of architectural features, domes that are higher than that. It has a gym, inside gym, which is about 28 feet. And this is the architecture. It's relatively high end. This is the entrance. It's sort of, we'll call this the south entrance. It sort of faces southeast. But the site has, so that gives you a flavor of the architecture. 2 floors, a lot of glass, a lot of stone, cut stone, et cetera, et cetera. And this is the footprint of the school that'll set on the site. You can see there's the southeast entrance I just showed you. So the middle, high school will go there, primary will enter here, and we've got, coming into the site, we've created 2 entrances. This is the Bowden Road entrance. This is, staff doesn't like this, but I call it the Greenfield. It's the old Greenfield Road entrance here. This is Greenfield Avenue still. So they'll come in this way and this way. We've allowed for stacking for people to drop off and drop the students for class. This is probably hard to see, but this is some of the architecture. Again, this is that entrance, southeast. This is more south, the primary, and then you can see the architecture of the building. Again, 120,000 square feet. In general, the landscaping is in compliance with what staff wanted. I think the landscaping, just to summarize, the landscaping is the same as it would be in the parking lot area. We have parking for 300, and we have landscaping in the islands similar to, I visited some of your school sites here. And this is the residual use that remains residential. There'll be 15-foot strips on either side separating the residential from the school. So we'll have effectively 30 feet of landscaping there. And then on Greenfield, we'll have 25 feet of landscaping. And on Bowden Road, we'll have 25 feet. On the top part, because of some wetlands, it's primarily a 50-foot strip around the top part, the northern part of the parcel. So to summarize, from 10,000 feet, we've got 50 feet on the top, 50 on the west, 25, plus the parking lot landscaping, and then 30. So it's pretty heavily landscaped. Not that we're trying to hide the architecture, but we think it fully complies. So we're not, you know, sometimes these projects come in and they try to cut back. This is, I think, fully in compliance. Now, there's no street trees. There's no building base, which is typical of schools. Staff allows us to exclude that for safety reasons, but we've got a pretty heavily landscaped site. The site's got other features. It's got a soccer field, tennis courts, a lot of green space for other activities. We've got a retention pond in place. To the top, we've got some multifamily, and then we've got the residual residential. So we think this is an appropriate site for this type of facility. Now, just if you're in this area to the north about 0.8 of a mile, I think you just approved, you may remember this, you just approved a school, an elementary school for Hamilton, I think it was Hamilton Southeastern jurisdiction, but there's a school at 156th and Bowden. So the Aluta Foundation, you know, your question is probably like mine. Well, okay, tell me about the school. Well, the school, to brag just briefly on the school, and then I'll tie this up. The school has, you're saying, well, tell me the details. Well, the school is fully accredited with the state of Indiana. They're under the state's jurisdiction. They operate just like any other school, and by analogy, they'd be substantially similar to like the international school or a Brebeuf. So they have 180 days. They're regulated by the Indiana Department of Education, and their calendar is in alignment with Hamilton Southeastern schools. So they're very substantially similar to International School or Brebeuf, and they educate. I think this is they educate across all social economic classes. You know, they're not just certain elite students. And the only thing that's a little different here, to be upfront, they have math, all the other subjects that Mr. Davis and I had trouble with when we were in school, but they also teach, they have Arabic. So the only difference primarily with their curriculum is they also offer the Arabic language as a thing. Now, to talk a little bit about the school, they have received, their third grade won the top award in the state of Indiana for literacy. They just won that award, so they're proud of that. They have about 400 students now. They're in 3 buildings they're in Fisher's area, so they want to consolidate and build this school. And they also, the important thing, they've had advanced placement, and they're in the top 3% in the United States with their advanced placement score. And the advanced placement score is not that you've got 5 or 6 whiz kids and they push the score numbers way up like in bowling. It's completely across the whole school, so they're in the top 3% there. And I think Dr. Rashid will be happy to respond, but they have a 8-to-1 student-teacher ratio, which is probably one of the most important factors that they maintain. And and they do great advanced placement for college. They have students that go to the Ivy League schools, go on to all type of secondary, graduate work throughout the United States. So we're asking that you approve this special consideration, approve this amendment, which simply allows the school use to go in. And the staff, we've also included another thing in the ordinance, not to bore you with it, but the staff was concerned that they have to do some the construction time. They have a 3-year limit. We've put this in the ordinance, a 3-year limit to start construction. If they don't get started in 3 years, they can ask the plan director for a 1-year extension. And hopefully they'll get started sooner than that, but they have to consolidate from their buildings in Fishers to move up here. So with that, we're asking for approval. I know both IU and Purdue play tonight on TV, so I'll stop and find it more productive to respond to your questions than to keep talking.
Any questions for Mr. Byer? Mark Boyce.
You may have mentioned this during Planning Commission, but I don't remember. I'm just curious. Is there a predominantly higher percentage in the elementary or the high school, or is it pretty evenly populated? Just out of curiosity.
The lower grades have many more students.
Have many more? Okay. Thank you.
Private schools.
Yeah, I think so.
What's the capacity of the school?
I think the anticipated capacity, they start off at 400. They hope in 5 years it could be 600, but I think capacity would be 800. So it's designed at the 120,000 square foot. And I think, Bob, it could be expanded. It may be built and expanded, or
they were looking at doing it in 2 phases.
So they'll build it in 2 phases, but total capacity would be 800 students.
Thank you.
Mr. Peterson?
Mr. Johnson.
The location of the soccer field's adjacent to Greenfield. I just would like to see a little more perhaps buffering or fencing or something to keep balls and children from running onto Greenfield. Pretty heavily traveled, and they're at the northwest or the due west corner of the site.
So you'd like to see...
Only comments. Fencing or some sort of a barricade to keep children and soccer balls from running into the heavily traveled Greenfield.
Good point, and we'll look into that.
Thank you.
There's a soccer barrier that usually goes behind the goalposts.
Yes.
That are 15, 20 feet tall.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
This is more for just public record, but you mentioned that in the southeast corner, that you had mentioned housing. I just wanted it to be clear for the record that there's not a housing project going in there. It's just that's the residual from what
Yes,
was previously.
exactly. It's the It's the residual from the 2022 ordinance, the
Correct.
residential, right?
Yeah.
Which was a combination of what was classified in the preliminary development plan of carriage units and townhome units. So,
Yeah. Yep. Any other questions? Okay, we will see you in 2 weeks.
okay, thank you very much.
On to the next one. Council to consider ordinance 010124 and ordinance amending section 3801 of the city's code of ordinance, payment of certain expenses.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Caitlin Moss.
Hi, Caitlin Moss, Deputy Controller. So this ordinance is really just amending an old ordinance that's from, I believe, the 1990s. At the time, it matched the state code. However, since then, state code and our practices has changed. And so this amendment is really just to kind of get us back up to speed with the state by adding a couple of new provisions allowing for these prepayments, as well as just matching up with our current practices. So it allows for 13 different situations where these payments would be available to be made ahead of the normal claims docket. However, they would then be on the next claims docket for you to still review. And specifically, number 12 on the list allows for emergency situations, however, does require us to communicate with the council or the finance committee before any payment will be made in those situations to allow for a little bit less judgment there. Are there any questions?
Any questions?
No questions. We just talked about this at length at Finance Committee.
Yeah.
Good conversation.
Thank you. See you in 2 weeks. Proposed development presentations. Council to hear introductory information for proposed change of zoning from R1 residential to PB planned business and adoption of a preliminary development plan for a 14,721 square foot Goddard School on approximately 2.44 acres at Castamere Drive, a part of the Cranbrook Plan Development. John Lassar. Lasso. There we go.
Good evening, John Lasso, Companion Property Group, 15815 Shining Spring Drive, Westfield. Tonight, Ms. Yelton has a presentation that she will be sharing with you, but we are proposing the zoning change from the R1 to the PB planned business zone for a Goddard School early educational building. The site has had its challenges over the years just with the pipeline easement that runs along the east side. And we are proposing the 14,721 square foot Goddard School at this site. And I'll turn it over to Ms. Yelton to present if she, are you presenting? Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I misunderstood. So I guess with that, I'll open it up with any questions.
Any questions? If not, we will see you as you work your way through the process.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Council to consider resolution RC 0124, a resolution authorizing certain routine fiscal actions. Ian Zogowski.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. President, council members, new council members, welcome. My name's Ian Zolgowski. I'm the Deputy Financial Officer for the City of Noblesville. Tonight I bring to you Resolution RC 124. This is a resolution that is virtually the same one as we've adopted in years prior. In brief, it grants the controller 4 specific permissions to execute budgetary actions that are purely technical in nature and are not necessarily appropriate to bring for full council action. The first item allows us to realign small appropriations within a fund to reflect actual spending throughout the year. This has a quarterly limitation and is also tied to a stipulation that we come back to you quarterly and report on any transfers that we execute. The second item allows us to realign personnel services appropriations to distribute any pay adjustments that were approved during the budget process but still required analysis at the beginning of 2024 to decide how those appropriations would be split among the departments. The third item allows the controller to do de-appropriations with the Department of Local Government Finance solely to align the financial data they show with the city's fiscal plan. Not only does this item not increase the budget by any means, it technically decreases the budget from the vantage point of the state. And finally, the fourth item will allow the controller to execute final end-of-the-year appropriation transfers as part of our cleanup process. Since the budget is a regulatory constraint, departments are not able to overspend their budget. And so this last item gives us the ability to do those last-minute transfers to shuffle appropriation authority between the departments or within departments. Again, this doesn't give us the ability to increase the budget in any way, and we are also still required to report any transfers that we do as part of that end-of-the-year cleanup. So we come back to you generally in February of the following year to report on any of those transfers that we need to do to close out that year. I know that's a lot jam-packed into one resolution, so if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them for you.
Any questions? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I would move that we approve Resolution RC-1-24 as presented.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those, this is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 9-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council to consider Resolution RC-224, a resolution authorizing the appropriation of grant proceeds in 2024. Caitlin Moss.
So under this resolution, it allows for Office of Finance and Accounting to appropriate grant proceeds. Council has the authority to appropriate these proceeds, but it's rather inefficient and somewhat unnecessary to request every time we get a grant because it's unlikely that you would say no to a grant. And also, the grants that we do this for are very specific in what they're allowed to be used for. Also, at the end of every quarter, you'll receive a report from us, as you have in prior years, showing what grants we've used this appropriation authority for. Any questions?
Any questions?
Mr. President,
Ms.
I would
Wiles.
move that we approve Resolution RC-2-24 as presented.
Second.
The motion and a second. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. 9-0. All right. We're off to a good start. Any council comments? Welcome new members.
Thanks.
If there are no comments, we are adjourned.